Have a number of items today in our business session. And the first are committee reports. We're going to try to start with Dr. Paul Rago for the SSC report.
Okay.
There you go. We hear you now.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Paul, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome everybody. The SSC met in May, and all the information related to that is behind tab 14. There's a fairly extensive report. Next slide, please. Our kind of as a basic outline of what I'll be covering today are the items that are in black there, not the ones in blue. We basically had 12 different topics that we addressed, but much of the information related to the species specific recommendations has already been covered. So I'll be talking about the CAMS review, the updates from the research track assessments, and then a couple of subcommittees within the SSC. So I'll get right to it. The first item was the CAMS review. Next slide, please. CAMS is the acronym for the Catch Accounting and Monitoring System. This project was reviewed by a panel from the Center for Independent Experts, and the objective of CAMS is to get a common approach to estimate landings and discards in both real-time monitoring and for stock assessment. So basically it will be serving two masters simultaneously. And one of the difficulties of this process, apart from the complexity of the whole landings process and discard estimation, is that the real-time data come in at different rates. Some of it comes in very quickly, transactions of businesses and so forth, whereas those pieces of information related to processing of observer data and so forth comes in with the vessel, but it requires some post-processing before it can be transmitted. So this sort of differential timing and arrival of information creates some estimation problems. CAMS uses a real-time algorithm to do this processing. So that's really kind of the distinguishing feature between that and what has often been done in the past, which was wait until all the information is assembled. This new information will be used in the 2023 management track assessments, both in July and September. Next slide, please. Owing to this complexity, the SSC had a number of concerns, and first and foremost is the well-known problem of the absence of a unique trip identifier. And the purpose of that, it would be to link all the various databases and records as they arise. So this includes vessel trip reports, the dealer records, the observer, and then the port sampling and other aspects that are done. So in the absence of this unique trip identifier, requires basically you might call soft matching between to link records that otherwise appear to be distinct, but in fact may have a day off or may not be uniquely identifiable. So the unique trip identifier has been under a concern for a very long time, but it is under a consideration. It's not part of CAMS per se, but it will be the kind of the primary beneficiary. This work is about 80 to 90% complete. Next slide, please. The SSC also had some concerns and questions about the details that it received and the details in the report. It wanted to see more side-by-side differences for representative species and look for some of the details on the matching algorithms. It was important that given the role of uncertainty in the Council's risk policy, that those estimates of uncertainty be identified and estimated. In terms of sort of overall data management, there was a strong recommendation that all the databases be backed up, so that these are completely archived, so that things can be verified by going back to historical data, and this includes the documentation for those procedures as well. The ability to create new uses or newly identified problems was also highlighted there, and one of those might be both landings and discards by geographic areas. So for things like ecosystem considerations, this will be an important future need. So this was highlighted as a concern. There was some request for additional clarifications, not only coordination with the ACCSP, but also how some standardized methods for estimation of age-specific landings and discards. Now, this is done by the stock assessment scientists and through the research track or management track process, but and it's not part of CAMS per se. Also, there were some questions about how integration of information from electronic discard monitoring programs would be incorporated. And then finally, we did have some questions related to how or if the use of study fleet data could be used. Next slide, please. We did receive 2 previews of research track assessments. Now, this, of course, is important because it provides sort of advance notice of a number of things. One of them is the methodological advances. The science continues to improve and advance, and that includes estimation methods, the modeling approach that's used to describe the dynamics over time, procedures for handling uncertainty, and then how the projections are handled and how we characterize the uncertainty. Typically, the research track assessments are test beds or places where new experimental data or literature results from the NTAP process, the Trawl Advisory Panel experiments, aging methods for, say, spiny dogfish, or experiments that address things like discard mortality rates. So that is another aspect that is incorporated as part of the research track. And there's also the opportunity at the research track to incorporate new time series. So, for example, recreational CPUE is an important metric of relative abundance for bluefish. That information was updated by looking not only at the effort associated with bluefish, but also similarly related species. So a black sea bass or scup trip that might also have been a trip where bluefish were part of the mix, just a recreational trip. So there were some significant improvements there. There were some additions of state surveys, and of course the inclusion of ecosystem data. One of the features that the SSC is interested in, and the geek community in general, is sort of this model building process. So how is where do you start out and where do you end up in terms of defining an appropriate model for the system? So that also is a detail that is important. And then identification of major sources of uncertainty and research recommendations. So I'll get to the next slide. Kind of gives an overview of the spiny dogfish research track assessment. They made some substantial progress with respect to the modeling. There's the size and sex-based model, so males and females are treated separately. The natural mortality and maturation rates were revised downward based on new information. And finally, the fishery selectivity was estimated for multiple fleets. So gillnets, trawls, and gillnets and trawls. The results overall suggest lower productivity than previously estimated. That there was no formal status determination obtained, and that's not the point in the research track assessments. The point is to make the most advances, and then the management track, which follows this, will be the vehicle in which the most recent data are included, and the formal determination is derived. There are concerns and continuing concerns about current age and growth, and a member of the SSC offered to help facilitate some scientific exchanges with European scientists working on spiny dogfish in the North Sea. Just as a comment, we note that the lightly fished male dogfish population remains high, and the management track for this is expected sometime in September or later this fall. I think still under discussion. Next slide, please. Bluefish was also updated significantly. There's a new state space model, which basically incorporates the observational error in basically the measurements more appropriately using a state space model. And this also allows for sort of a more natural incorporation of ecosystem information. So it really is the future of a lot of stock assessments, not only in the Northeast, but also it's catching on around the U.S. and around the world. The major changes associated with this were the use of age-specific natural mortality rates. Previously, they were assumed to be constant with respect to age, and there's also an improvement in the estimation of discard weights in the recreational fisheries. They're split now by north and south, reflecting different fishing patterns and availability of large fish to recreational fishermen. As I mentioned, the recreational CPUE was improved by consideration of trips for closely related species, and then the updated reference points were done as a result of all these other changes. So there was some useful incorporation of predator-prey species and composite indices of prey abundance that were used as part of some predictors for trying to describe the stock dynamics. And a lot of this information was synthesized in what are called ESP indices, or ecosystem and socioeconomic profiles. So we spent a lot of time learning about those. And then finally, all of these factors will be incorporated in the management track assessment to be reviewed later this year. So next slide, please. Okay, we did have a session and had a small working group that had provided information about the OFL-CV, that is the coefficient of variation applied to the OFL. This is important because we take the information from the stock assessments, determine an appropriate level of variation associated with it. That includes not only the association variability about the estimate from the model, but also a number of other factors. And those factors are sort of, there are 9 different elements from that, which we go through. And this has obviously very important consequences for the subsequent ABCs, and the communication of this information is I feel one of the most important aspects of the work with the SSC. So we made a number of recommendations. One is that we will apply the methodology as it exists right now. At our July meeting, we have quite a few species to address and derive new ABCs for. And one of the objectives of our review process will be to check for consistency over years and species. Are we applying the same standards over time to the same species, and then are we applying the same standards across species? The process is becoming extraordinarily complex. Have we sort of reached the point of diminishing returns by continual refinement of it? So we'll be taking a hard look at that, and so appreciate feedback for people that those stakeholders and so forth. And finally, it's important that the methodology is not only transparent, but it's adequately communicated to stakeholders, so they can basically see the process, or see the wording associated with that process. So that will be part of our review, which we'll be reporting on sometime in later this year as we advance. The next slide, please. We also have had a group on ABC averaging. I've highlighted this problem to the group before, and after a long set of debates and some trials of more sophisticated methods and other aspects, and in view of some resource limitations and so forth, we've recommended continuation of the current methodology. That current methodology basically consists of torturing the center scientists and council staffs through an iterative process of back and forth in order to derive a average ABC that meets the council's risk policy and also meets the council's desire for absence of change across years. So the whole idea of this averaging is to get a constant value that satisfies all of the constraints associated with the risk policy over time. So one of the reasons for continuing the current methodology is that there's a change going from what's called legacy software to the new modeling approach, WAM, which I mentioned before. WAM stands for the Woods Hole Assessment Model. So we're beginning that planning for new model formulations, states, so that will be the wave of the future, and it's better to make the investment in that process as opposed to other ones. And then finally, we had some recommendations, and we'll be following up on work with other SSCs from other councils on their processes. So there are some reports that are available that will inform that. My next and final slide is just other business. The national SSC, which was previously held in Alaska in 2022, will now be hosted in 2024 by the New England Council. And the basic theme of that will be application of control rules in a changing environment. So certainly apropos to many of the topics we've discussed this week. We did sort of as a follow-on to that, there were a number of suggestions for improved communications among SSCs and how this might be done on an ongoing basis. We felt that there would be some utility in sort of this cross-fertilization to sort of get the lay of the land and see how other councils do business. So, and there were some recommendations as to whether the council might feel it might support something like this. This might be something that would have to be done, obviously, at a national level. We did have some comments on the risk of CAM and some updates related to spiny dogfish. I can go into details on those. They are described in the report. And then finally, we'll be going to the City of Brotherly Love for our next meeting in July. So that concludes my report. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions for Dr. Rago? Michelle Duval.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul, for the report. Notice I didn't say Dr. Rago, and it was really difficult to not do that.
Very much appreciated. Thank you.
So just to clarify, CAMS has not been used yet in any of our assessments. And when do we anticipate the first application or use of CAMS within an assessment might be? That might actually be a question for Dr. Hare. I don't know, but I thought I'd ask it of you first.
Yeah, no, it will be used for these assessments, and some of the data has been used already. So with respect to the landings part of CAMS, the estimation of discards within CAMS is still the aspect which has not been used, and that will be incorporated for the management track assessments. What is not 100% clear yet is whether it will only be used for the changes going forward, so the most recent years, or whether it will be retrospectively applied to the historical catch information. I think that will be a decision to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. There are some instances in which those comparisons have suggested that there's something missing, so to speak, in the algorithm, so that they need to, and the process of reconciliation is still underway. Okay.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Paul? Seeing no hands in the room, is there anyone online that has any questions for Paul at this time? In the audience? Okay, seeing none. Paul, thank you for your SSC report, and hopefully we'll get to see you at a meeting soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hope so too.
Okay, the next item on our agenda this morning is an Ecosystem and Ocean Planning Committee report. Dr. Michelle Duval is with us as chair of the Ecosystem and Ocean Planning Committee. And Michelle, I'll turn to you for your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just a big shout out to all of the EOP members and advisory panel members. We've had a lot of work on our plate lately, and huge shout out to Brandon and Julia for putting together these slides to sort of walk us through. There's a lot of material that was in the briefing book, and we just thought it might be helpful to do that. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is just the ecosystem, is the Council's EAFM risk assessment review. So if you recall, we took sort of a three-pronged approach of this. And so we last updated you in December after the committee met in November. So we had our first of 3 meetings, a joint meeting of the committee and the AP at the end of April. And so this one was really focused on the risk elements and the definitions. And so, you know, the elements themselves are what are we measuring, and the definitions, you know, are sort of why are we measuring it. So the elements that we have currently are really framed around the council's management objectives and risks to meeting those. So, you know, things like seafood production, optimum yield, recreational opportunities, community and fishery resilience, bycatch, protected species interaction. So we did ask the committee and AP to do a little pre-meeting homework to get some feedback on existing and potential new elements, whether those should be kept, modified, deleted. And so folks offered some suggested modifications. You can see on the right-hand side of the slide there, you know, the risk elements we have, you know, what the current definitions are, and then sort of the proportion of folks who responded as to whether or not those should be kept, modified, or deleted. So next slide, please. So in terms of the existing elements, 14 out of the 24 existing elements were identified to sort of keep as is. We did have a few suggested wordsmithing things that we'll be reviewing at our next meeting. The remaining elements, there were some modifications that were recommended. So we discussed those. I think the results of that discussion are in the briefing materials. And then we also reviewed some potentially new elements, and some of these were ones that were considered by the Ecosystem and Ocean Planning Committee and AP during the initial development of the risk assessment. There are some additional ones that have come out of the State of the Ecosystem reports, and a few others that were identified by EOP members. So there were over 20 potentially new elements. We got some great feedback on whether those should be kept, modified, or deleted. And so there were some modifications and alternatives that were developed for the review. And so we're not finalizing that list of risk elements just yet. We're just identifying, what we want to measure potentially, and we're keeping it on the list for now. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we've divided this review of the EAFM risk assessment sort of into 3 components. So we've checked off our list. Our first meeting, considering risk elements and definitions. We're planning for a webinar on July 7th, where we will go ahead and review the results of some additional homework that we asked folks to do with respect to the modifications to the definitions of the risk elements. But we're really going to be focused on indicators and ranking criteria. And then we're planning for an in-person meeting in September to review the risk assessment components and the application for the council needs. And so we'll then come back to the council in October and present an updated assessment, hopefully for council review and approval. It's a lot of work to do in sort of a short period of time. So it's been a little bit challenging trying to work around other schedules for assessments. And, there are some Science Center staff that are really critical to this. So just also want to thank Garrett Piper and Sarah Gates for their time in this as well. So now I'm going to shift gears, and if we can move on to the next slide, just quickly review the other task that we've been working on. So as part of our 2023 implementation plan, one of our tasks was to develop a policy and/or process for reviewing exempted fishing permit applications for new or expanding fisheries as it relates to the unmanaged forage amendment. And so I think just as you all recall, the unmanaged forage amendment, sort of prohibits the development of new or expansion of existing fisheries before the council's had the opportunity to review the existing or any new science and sort of make a determination as to what impacts that might have on, the ecosystem, fishing communities, and fisheries. So this is part of our tasking for this year. Next slide, please. So the committee met and reviewed the first part of this task, and then the advisory panel met subsequent to that. So what we did was we looked at the Pacific Fishery Management Council has an operating procedure. It's Council Operating Procedure 24. We looked at the possibility of using that as a template, and then staff had also provided some additional recommendations that the committee and council might want to consider. So, the nutshell is that the committee, endorsed and agreed with using the Pacific Council's operating procedure as a template with some tweaks. So we identified a few things we thought might not work for the Mid-Atlantic Council, but we also recommended adding all of the staff recommendations. And I think one of the additional things we looked at was, also developing some guidelines for SSC review that could inform some terms of reference. So thought that might be important. We do have there's an existing thread herring exempted fishing permit that Lund's Fisheries has submitted and has, kind of been working through this process. And the SSC had taken a look at that, and we thought it might be a good idea to sort of more formally include that in our policy. The other thing we talked about was sort of a decision tree approach to determine if relevant EFPs warrant a full review or if fewer steps could suffice. So GARFO staff who were on the committee expressed some concern about, I think, repetition of the process that GARFO already undertakes when reviewing exempted fishing permits, and wanted to be sure that any policy or process that the council develops would would add and complement that process, would add to and complement that process. So that was what to try to address those concerns. That's one of the things that the committee said it would be supportive of. So next slide, please. So then the advisory panel provided input on the review process. So they had the opportunity to review what the committee had, the outcomes of the committee meeting. I was unable to attend that advisory panel webinar, but Julia was kind enough to provide me the recording, so I was able to listen to that, and it was a very robust discussion. There were mixed opinions on the use of the Pacific Council's operating procedure as a template. You can see there on the screen that some members, AP members, supported it, others opposed it. I think for those supporting it, they felt like the Pacific Council's operating procedure provided a good template to consider ecosystem impacts, and advisory panel members who were opposed to it were concerned that the process was too complex and that this could potentially serve as a barrier to obtaining exempted fishing permits, particularly for small businesses, noting the process that Lens has gone through thus far and the resources that they've put into that. So I'll just also note that one of the things that came out of the AP as well, which I think is consistent with what the committee has said, is that we do need clear guidelines on like the types of analysis needed to support the issuance of exempted fishing permits. And then a few other advisors noted that the council should support opportunities for development of new sustainable fisheries, that we're living in a changing world, potentially changing ecosystem, and that as climate change affects existing fisheries, we need to be responsible and flexible with respect to development of new fisheries. So I'm going to stop there and just see if any committee members who are sitting around the table have anything that they would like to add, or if there are any questions from the council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for your report. Let me ask and see if there are any members of the council that have any questions or comments. Michelle? Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, just one follow-up on sort of the next steps for the EFP process policy. So, there will be another meeting in September whereby the advisory panel would be able to, review and provide feedback on a draft policy/process, and then the committee would meet again to, review AP input before providing recommendations to the council. So, just want to make sure I note that. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Has the venue for that in-person meeting been selected? Is that going to be like a Baltimore or Philly or something like that?
I'm going to look to Brandon to answer that. I think Brandon is on the line.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we haven't set a date yet for those, because as Michelle had indicated, we're going to be coordinating this meeting, to cover a few different topics, and we may also have the EOP committee and AP weighing in on the essential fish habitat at that time. So we have a lot of moving parts, I guess, and so we don't have the dates exactly yet, but probably that Philadelphia, Baltimore sort of area, something in the middle for folks that's easy to get in and out of.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Sonny Gwen?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that presentation. One question on the three AP members who opposed because the process is too complex. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
I think I'm going to ask Julia to be on notice to weigh in here. But I think there was concern that, so the Pacific Council operating procedure is very detailed. It's lengthy. It does include a lot of what is currently in the federal regulations with respect to what an exempted fishing permit should include. So there are regulations already on the books that, list all the requirements of what should be in an EFP. So it lists all of that. And then it also includes a bunch of additional considerations, like the types of exempted fishing permits that the Pacific Council would prioritize in the review. I think there were several advisory panel members who felt like it was too complicated. And I think it seemed, after listening to the conversation, that some of that complexity, or the perception of complexity, was also based on, I think, what has occurred thus far with review of the threat hearing EFP as well. So I'll stop there and just see if Julia wants to add anything else to that.
Julia?
Thanks. Just to add that the COP24 process and the process that was followed for the thread herring EFP to a large extent too, it adds on lots of additional meetings beyond the typical EFP review process, where like typically GARFO would have most of the responsibility for reviewing the EFP, and the council would be notified, and the council could provide comments, and GARFO has their own review process and still has to comply with NEPA and the Mangus Act and protected species, everything. But the COP24 process adds in additional meetings for SSC, AP, council, committee sorts of reviews, and it has specific timelines for things like that. So there was some discussion of like, are all those layers of review necessary when the GARFO process is already covering a lot of the same topics.
Okay, thanks, Julia. I appreciate that. Thank you, Michelle. Mike Penny?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so I have, I guess, some concerns and some thoughts and some suggestions for consideration between now and the September meeting. Getting an EFP is already pretty complex through the federal process, as many people who've gone through the process can attest. And so I have some sort of overarching concerns about making it more complicated, more time consuming, more burdensome on the applicant, sort of comports with some of the AP member concerns. But part of that, I think, has to do with, and I don't have a solution to offer, unfortunately, but it may be something for the EOP committee to think about. Part of it has to do with sort of the timelines. What I see envisioned here is that an applicant would, before they submitted anything to the regional office, they would submit something to the council, and they potentially go through this council process that would be based on the Pacific Council's process. And theoretically, at the end of that process, the council would then endorse an EFP application to submit to us. But what happens then when we get it and we have concerns and we work with the applicant to revise potentially significantly the EFP application so that the project looks kind of different than what the council reviewed? Does that suggest that it needs to go back through council review? Or does it undermine the council's endorsement because it's theoretically of a project of a different scope? And so I think that's something to think about, is how that, you have one review by the council and you end up with something and the applicant thinks, I'm good to go. The council's given me the endorsement, and then they come to us and we have concerns and we want to work with them to revise things. And that could be really frustrating for an applicant if they've already gone through an extensive process. There are other cases where we're going to get an application, and there's been some that we've discussed. I think the thread herring one, all credit to Lunds and Jeff Kalin for their persistence and and patience in working through for years a process to try to get this thread herring EFP together. We talked about some of the EFP applications that we've reviewed for the clam fishery, you know, in the Nantucket Shoals area with the closed area and what they're trying to get access to. And that's been one where we've had a lot of back and forth with the New England Council as well, where we're seeking the council's input because the purpose of the EFP is directly related to council action, right? So the idea of the EFP for that one is to provide information to the New England Council to make a decision about access. The thread herring EFP ostensibly is to collect data to inform a council decision about creating a thread herring fishery. So I think there's a number of EFPs where there is a strong council nexus, and we would want the opinion and input from the council, but I'm not sure how best to incorporate that into our process. It may be that we would be looking for input from the council after we've thoroughly reviewed an EFP package with an applicant and have a revised proposal that we think makes sense. And before we publish it in the Federal Register to start a specific timeline, we seek a council review and opinion. But that's not really built into what's suggested here. And so I'm just throwing some ideas out for the EOP to consider and maybe work through some options so that there's some flexibility built in without creating a system that is too burdensome or complicated for a lot of applicants and feel like they're going to have to go through a review process twice and not know the outcome. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Michelle?
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. I appreciate those comments. I don't think anybody wants to end up with a process that is overly burdensome. I think we started down this road trying to create something that would bring more clarity to folks who want to, you know, potentially submit an exempted fishing permit to develop a fishery. And I think, you know, perhaps had we had something in place, maybe, you know, some of the back and forth or information that, you know, is being requested for the thread herring EFP, that might have been known sooner. And so I think we're just trying to create some clarity. So I definitely appreciate, you know, the process concerns, absolutely valid. I think, you know, the staff recommendation thus far was that it would come to it could be sent, that applications be sent to the regional office for preliminary review, you know, at the same time that they could be sent to the council. But so you would have that sort of informal back and forth for the regional office to say, hey, we have these concerns, you know, but then, you know, formal submission would occur later. So, I mean, I'm being long-winded here and apologies for that. Your concerns are well noted, and I think that, you know, we'll definitely discuss them in a future meeting. So we don't want something that's overly burdensome, but something that will provide clarity. Thanks.
Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate that, and I hope we can, you know, make some progress. I think where I'm optimistic and I see a real benefit is to have something written down so it's not just an ad hoc process. So that every time an EFP application comes in, there's a lack of clarity about who does what when and how's the process, and do we involve the SSC or do the committees get involved? And so I think, you know, there are sort of two overarching sort of categories. There's one category where an applicant may see a strong nexus with the council process and want the council endorsement before they submit it to the agency for review. So it would be good to have a process that's not ad hoc so that applicants know what to expect if they're seeking a council endorsement. On the other hand, it might be a case where we get an application and we work with the applicant, but before we're ready to pull the trigger and issue it, we want council review to make sure that what we would issue would be consistent with the council's wishes. And so it might be good to have sort of a protocol in that case where we've already done our review, and we, the agency, are seeking a council review before we issue. And in both of those cases, I think having something that's not just an ad hoc, make it up as we go along for each individual project, I think would be helpful.
Michelle?
No, I appreciate those suggestions and recommendations, and I think everyone who's on the committee sitting around here appreciates those as well. And I mean, I know I'm just looking at like the existing regulations and which do say, and you all have done this, the regional administrator shall consult with the executive director of the Mid-Atlantic Council before approving any exemptions for the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, including exemptions for experimental fishing contributing to the development of new or expansion of existing fisheries for mid-Atlantic forage species. So there is that chunk of the regulation, that's already there, and you all have done that. So just a capstone, I guess.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, that is there. I think for everybody's clarity, though, that typically happens within a very narrow, like 2-week window. We published a Federal Register notice for an EFP with 15-day comment period, and we send council a quick blurb saying, hey, we've got this EFP application out there. So what the EOP committee is envisioning would not fit within that current process. So we would be needing to figure out how and where, when and where would some other process fit in without making the whole thing overly cumbersome.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike and Michelle. Wes Towson?
I guess, Mr. Penny, this would be for you. How many current EFPs do we have going on right now? And in the last 10 years, how many have been issued? Any clue? A lot? A few?
A lot, yeah. But I don't have a specific number. I would take some more. But yeah, we issue, fair number every year for a variety of projects up and down the coast.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Michelle or Mike? Okay, seeing none at this time. Thank you, Michelle, for your report, and thanks for all the hard work that you've put into and with the committee to getting this type of work done. It's really appreciated. Okay, I failed to give all of you just a quick kind of scheduling update on what we're going to do today. So I know that some of you have flights and times where you need to leave. We're going to stick to the agenda today. We won't go past 1 o'clock. But what I'd like to do at this time right now is turn to Chris for the executive director's report. We'll take a break after that so that you can check out if you haven't done so already. And we'll return for organization reports before we adjourn for the week. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Dr. Chris Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. There's a number of items behind tab 15 that we'll be talking about this morning. There's also some supplements that have been posted during the week. Most recent ones were posted yesterday. The first item behind the tab is our council meeting topics documents. There's 2. Take a look at that August meeting. So it indicates 8 through 11. So that's 4 days. That means we start on Tuesday, we end on Friday. This is something we talked about at our last meeting. We're doing that to accommodate the change in council membership. Busy meeting with the ASMSC board, the Summer Flounder, Scut Black Sea Bass boards, as well as the Bluefish board. So we have a lot to do. Expect that we'll start at least half day on Tuesday, go through a half day on Friday. You can take a look and see what we have planned for the rest of the year. I'm not going to talk about our October meeting or our December meeting, but both of those are going to be busy meetings as well. Next item behind the tab is something that I need some input from the council on, and that relates to our 2025 meeting schedule. So I was sitting down with Shelley to plan our future meetings. I think everyone knows at this point that we have our 2024 meeting set. But before we picked locations and dates for 2025, we thought that we may want to make one change in 2025, try something new. And that is actually have a one-day virtual meeting in February instead of our two-day February meeting where we're sometimes struggling for things to do. So that's the lightest meeting of the year. Typically, it's light because we've just gotten back from our holidays. We've taken care of a lot of things in December, so we're recovering from that. So the proposal is to have a one-day virtual meeting in February instead of an in-person meeting. Some of you may react to that and say, hey, but that's contrary to what you talked about before, Chris, which is the importance of in-person meetings. Well, our in-person meetings are important to emphasize those that we'd like to have everyone attend in person. But I also think we need to be flexible and adapt and thinking about travel in February and how things might be bad given the light schedule. I think it makes sense to have a one-day virtual meeting. So we'd like to try it. So I just like to hear from the council as to whether or not you think it's a good idea as well, or not. And the reason I ask is that we collectively have to make that decision. It would be a change. We haven't really done this kind of thing before in the sense that we've actually scheduled it. We know how to do these, right? For the last couple of years, we've been doing virtual meetings, so I think we're pretty proficient at actually doing the meeting. So anyway, what do folks think? I'll stop there.
Thanks, Chris. I'll ask, I have an opinion, but I'll look to see if any other folks from the council do as well. Adam Nowalski.
I won't be here for that, but I completely endorse the idea. The only thing that I might toss out there is that I think there would be an expectation that there would be a cost savings to the council for doing so. I might just put out there that the council consider in transparency, letting the public know, okay, we're not just taking a virtual meeting to save money, period, but if there's something else we can use these funds for, letting the public know what we're doing with savings of a meeting might be a win-win for everybody would be all I'd put out there.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Michelle?
I fully support having a virtual meeting in February. I agree with what Dr. Moore said, and I think we can also be creative about how we use that meeting. Sometimes we have issues where we don't necessarily have sufficient time around the table to have a more robust discussion. Tend to be time limited, so we could also, think about donating a chunk of that meeting for a particular topic that just requires more discussion time than we generally have during our normal council meeting agenda as well.
Thanks for that, Michelle. Joe Cimino?
Yeah, thanks. I agree with Chris's reasoning, and ASMFC has had similar discussions but hasn't made decisions on that. And February is one of the ones that tends to be a back-to-back for those of us that are doing double duty. So it would be a bit of a relief there to, as you're traveling in those months. And it is, there's a potential, ASMFC had discussed about maybe doing it for their August meeting. So it might actually relieve both back-to-backs if the council and commission line those up like that.
Okay, thanks, Joe. I was going to mention ASMFC, so I'll cross that one idea off my list. Sonny Gwynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if I'm going to be there yet or not, but I will comment on it. I think that it should be set clearly that it's February and not be setting a precedence that this might be the future, since February would work as a virtual meeting and have the idea that, oh, this works, maybe we can keep doing it, because I think the in-person meeting is really important. But February would be a good time to have a virtual meeting since the workload is so small for the meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sonny. And we all certainly hope you'll be here for that meet for 2025. That's the hope and the plan. I will say that I had a hard time when we were, and we had to, but when we were virtual only for a while, that was difficult, especially when the council was tasked with making difficult decisions. It was hard, not only as chair, to run a meeting when you couldn't see people's reactions, and there just wasn't that opportunity to have sidebar discussions regarding the important decisions that we had to make during the time when we were virtual only. So what I would say is that I think as long as the work plan, and this is for, I guess, for Chris, as long as the work plan doesn't have us making any type of really important, not that any decision we make is not important, but if there's something that's a hot topic that is planned and scheduled to be discussed and debated and maybe final action on some type of work that we've done for a year or two, I think that would be difficult virtually. So if we foresee that coming, that could be an opportunity to plan accordingly. I know that 2025 is a couple of years from now, so it's hard to really see that coming, but that would be my one concern. But I do support the idea of a one-day virtual meeting when most of the information would be informative and an opportunity, as Michelle discussed, to open it up for discussion that we may not necessarily have if we were in person due to time limitations. So, is there anyone else at this time? Chris.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. With that, sounds like folks are pretty okay with a virtual meeting in February. Take a look at those other dates. We always have this thing with the August meeting when we're trying to bridge, new council members, incoming council member, the incoming council members, the council members that may be going out. We'll be starting August 11th, which is the first day for new council members, right? So we'll accommodate folks that may be going off the council by inviting them to that particular meeting, but their last official meeting would be given the schedule. As we move forward through the rest of the year, Shelley will be working on finding locations for those meetings. We'll provide those to the council. That, unless there's any other questions. Yes, Adam?
So that issue with regards to outgoing versus new members will be the same issue in 2024, I believe, due to the timing?
Yeah, and we've talked about that before. Other comments or questions? Okay, moving on. The next letter, or the next item behind the tab is our letter to GARFO regarding Amendment 23. We've talked about this before. We're going to talk about it again this morning for a little bit. I think everyone recognizes that NEMS published a notice of availability and proposed rule for Amendment 23. Amendment 23 is the document that relates to black sea bass commercial allocations. And in particular, the item that of concern is whether or not those allocations should be added to the federal FMP. Both the proposed rule and the NOAA indicate that the agency may disapprove the aspect of the amendment which would add black sea bass to the commercial state, which would add the black sea bass state commercial allocations to the council's FMP. The NOAA emphasizes that adding the allocations to the FMP would be costly for the government, and lack of representation by the New England states would make adding the allocations to the federal FMP unfair. We disagree. We say so in the letter that you have in front of you today. We submitted that comment letter on May 18th to strongly suggest that NIMS approve the amendment in its entirety. You can read the letter. It's in the briefing book. It reiterates the council's position that adding these allocations to the council's FMP is important to black sea bass management. I think it's an excellent letter. I haven't heard a lot of comments regarding the letter, but I think it's well done. And certainly, again, if you haven't looked at it for a while, take a look. Key points in the letter are summarized on this slide, and I'm going to go through some of those very quickly. First, adding the commercial state allocations to the council's FNP will ensure a thorough and transparent review of future changes to those allocations. The council is bound by the requirements of MSA, NEPA, and other applicable federal laws, which do not apply to the commission process. And the NOAA raises several points about the national standards. All council recommendations must demonstrate compliance with the national standards. The commission is not bound by the requirements of MSA. So it's not clear how excluding these allocations from the council FNP would provide for better consideration of the national standards. We think that the process that we've had in place for 30 years is fair and equitable. I'm talking about the joint decision-making process that we have between the council and the commission. It worked well. The NOAA states that NIM supports the outcome of the joint decision-making process that we use to modify the state allocations, while arguing at the same time that the process will result in an unfair and biased decision in the future. We think that's illogical, very concerning. Joint management has been in place for close to 30 years and has served both organizations very well. For example, several stocks, including black sea bass, were rebuilt under joint management, including the state allocations of both the council and the commission FNPs will bring the allocations in line with other aspects of the black sea bass management program. We think that all states with declared interest in the fishery have equal representation on the board, including those states that are not represented on the council. Remember that all joint actions must pass by a majority vote of both the board and the council, and we think this approach is equitable, consistent with the Magnuson-Stevens Act. Furthermore, the council and the board have adopted special voting procedures for this action to further address concerns about representation. In all final action decisions, the board voted first on alternatives to define the allocation percentages proposed by commissioners from New England states to ensure all states with declared interest in the fishery had a chance to vote on the allocations. The administrative burden on GARFO should be minimal. This is our next point, next major point. The administrative burden on GARFO should be minimal, mitigated by the use of existing well-functioning systems that are in place for summer flounder and bluefish. In addition, we think the administrative burden on the commission will be reduced. We do agree that adding the state allocations to the council's FNP will create new requirements for GARFO to monitor landings at the state level and manage quota transfer between states. GARFO has performed these tasks for summer flounder and bluefish for many years. Won't be any new process associated with doing the same thing with black sea bass. States are already familiar with the process for summer flounder and bluefish. And if you think about it, the change will also decrease the administrative burden on ASMSC and member states, given that they will no longer be responsible for managing those tasks. Last but certainly not least, it's important to acknowledge that most of these black sea bass harvest comes from federal waters. We talked about that before. So bottom line, costs associated with adding these allocations to the federal FNP far outweighed by the benefits of increased transparency, federal reviews for any changes in the future, enhancement of the joint management process that has rebuilt and managed the stock for over 30 years. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop to questions on what I've said relative to this particular document.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'll look to the council to see if anyone has anything they'd like to offer. Sonny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I'd like to thank the maker of the letter. And second, I would support this letter in its entirety. And third, I would like GARFO to take this letter seriously and go through all the points in this letter, because it is very important to the southern states. And thank you again.
Thank you, Sonny. Wes?
Chris, I don't know if this is for you or again to Mr. Pentney. Has there been any transfer of sea bass in the last 20 years? As far as from state to state? There has been. Okay.
Yeah, there have been transfers. Some states operate under an individual fishing quota, so they don't necessarily transfer unless there is a safe harbor issue. We've had a few of those in recent years where boats cannot get into certain harbors and decide to land their fish in other states, and then we do a transfer process at the state level to account for that. I know we just did some of that recently this year. Anyone else? Michelle?
Yeah, I'll echo Sunny's comments. I appreciated the letter. I thought it was very thoughtfully written and well put together, and I think very, very well justified. So I just appreciate the effort that went into it. Thanks.
Wes?
Sorry about coming back to the mic again. Yeah, I'm 100% support of the letter. And I think New England states have been well represented anyway with sea bass because we just transferred 18% of our fish anyway to the New England states. And the southern states like Delaware, this is all we have is sea bass. So 18% hit to us is a big chunk. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. Yeah, I'd like to take credit for writing the letter, but I want to thank Chris and his staff for putting this together. I reviewed it thoroughly and agreed with all of the statements within the letter, which is why I signed it. And I hope I hope this letter is taken seriously and then part of the decision-making process at the service. Let me look online to see if anyone online has anything. I don't see any more hands in the room. Anyone from the audience have anything they want to offer? Greg DiDomenico?
Greg DiDomenico, Lunds Fisheries. We obviously fully support this letter from the council and appreciate their thorough and I think pretty excellent response. We'll do our best to not only provide comments on the proposed rule as well, but hopefully facilitate comments from other people in the Mid-Atlantic, and would also I think agree with a lot of the comments regarding the issue of representation and our process here versus the New England process. As you know, we have two very, very big fisheries that are managed by the New England Council, scallops and monkfish, where I can certainly list a long list of things that have disadvantaged the Mid-Atlantic fishermen because of them being the lead. But we don't really, we don't refer to it as, us being misrepresented or not having any say in the process. So it would be best if that situation is reciprocated for the Mid-Atlantic fisheries, because losing any more allocation in our demersal fisheries, whether it be to New England states or on recreational issues or commercial issues, at this point, it's just, it's unacceptable to lose any more quota. And just wanted to say those things. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Anyone else from the public, from the audience? I'll bring it back to the council. I've got Eric Reed. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do appreciate the fact that you wrote this letter, but would it be possible that you could forward that to the New England Council for inclusion in our briefing book for our upcoming meeting? I'd appreciate it if you could.
Yeah, Eric, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no other hands, I'll just make one more comment before I turn back to Chris. I do recognize the concern regarding who has the ability to weigh in on these decisions. And if this were just a council managed species, I would say that there's certainly those concerns regarding how the stock of sea bass has expanded into the New England states. However, given our joint management efforts with the commission, having all of those states represented at the table, making the decisions, which need to be made together with this council and the commission, I feel that that representation should not be highlighted as a major concern. That you guys have all been here before. We have a table that's twice as long with people from all the states that are represented within the sea bass fishery, helping to guide our decision-making process, both at the board and the commission and the council level. So I know that that was a really big decision a number of years ago, but we'll see where this goes. But thank you all for your comments, and thanks, Chris, for that report. I'm going to turn back to you to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One last thing to note regarding this topic. The deadline for comments is July 3rd. So if folks are interested in sending in additional comments, that's your deadline. The next item behind the tab relates to longfin squid. It's a memo from Jason to me on our support of various things associated with longfin squid. There's a summary in that memo. Basically, the council has encouraged the center to establish the longfin squid RTA working group early. And we're asking for that, and we're working on that because of our experience with ILEX. So we had the experience with ILEX. It wasn't as smooth as we thought it should have been. We did a lot of things to make it smoother, anticipating that longfin might have some similar issues, and thinking about planning ahead. So if you think that we're planning too early, we're not. Even though the review's in March of 2026, we really need to start working on these things now. So the first one is, basically getting this working group together by the end of the year. We hope that happens. You can read some additional text, read it to you. And number two, we talk about working with the center to request proposals from a contractor with expertise in quantitative stock assessment to participate in the research track assessment. So that's out on the street now. Hopefully we'll get some good folks that are interested in doing that. We also, number three, talk about a project that is being worked on at the University of Maryland by Mike Wilberg and Jenny Neslage to organize a project to develop and test length-based assessment models for U.S. East Coast squid. And we are supporting that project as well. Staff are participating with them in that particular project. Last but certainly not least, we need data to make sure that this assessment works. After the last longfin squid stock assessment, a variety of data needs were identified regarding longfin aging, growth, and activity. And we have proposals out on the streets asking for folks to do some of that work for us. So that's the squid work. Any questions or comments before we move on?
John Hare.
No, thank you very much, Chris. And the center appreciates the proactive approach that the MID is taking, and sort of the reminder to the center that it's important for us to learn from the ELEX squid research track. We have the report that was done by Consensus Building Institute. We're jointly funding the projects with the University of Maryland. We fully intend this research track assessment to be more successful than the past one. But I just wanted to say we do appreciate the council's continued sort of constructive engagement on squid, ELEX, and longfin.
Okay, thanks, John. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none. Go ahead, Chris.
So the next, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item behind the tab is a fact sheet or memo regarding East Coast Climate Change Scenario Planning Initiative that the council's been involved with for a number of years. In that document, we talk about the fact that the CCC received an overview of the project. Recently, we talk about a meeting that was held, or the fact that we discussed it at the NRCC as well, and that we will be talking about it again at our August council meeting. So I won't spend a lot of time on it today, but know this. this document, I mean, this project, this initiative has been a big deal for the council, the other East Coast councils, and the National Marine Fisheries Service and the commission. And as a result of this particular activity, there's a number of action items that have been associated with work. Those action items are being summarized and will be available for folks to look at. There's also, we've taken action at the NRCC to form a group of folks from all the councils and regions, both regions and the science centers, to work on this particular topic of climate change and governance. So there's a lot going on. I won't spend a lot of time on it today. Take a look at the material behind or in the briefing book. Take a look at our climate change and fisheries webpage on our website. If you want some additional information. And we will spend a lot of time talking about this in August. Any questions about that before I move on? Seeing none. The next item on the tab is a memo to me from Jose regarding the Manafish Farm aquaculture project. This is in here because folks had some questions about it the last time we talked about it. So the last time I think was in what's that? I guess it was our April meeting. This topic came up. So there's some details there for you to take a look at regarding that particular project off of New York. So this is some interesting things there that I think may have some questions about. Certainly stop there and see if there's anyone that wants to make any comments or have any questions about that.
Anything for Chris on Manafish Farms? Seeing none, go ahead and move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next item beyond the tab is our action plan, draft action plan that Julia put together for the summer planner, scup, black sea bass, and bluefish recreational harvest control rule 2.0 framework addenda. So that's a mouthful. Talked about this a little bit before. It's part of our 2023 implementation plan. Typically, if there are things in our implementation plan, we have action plans associated with those, and this is that. So in this document, this memo that Julia has put together, there's some information regarding what we are attempting to do with this framework. We talk about some of the alternatives to be considered. We talk about the Fishery Management Action Team / PDT, Plan Development Team. There's the membership there for the folks that are interested. In here as well is a brief discussion about a commissioner council member working group to act as a liaison between the PDT, FMAT, and the policy board. This was something that came up at the recent commission meeting. The purpose of the group would be to provide clarification of policy board direction or feedback to the PDT, FMAT. We have members have been appointed by the commission. The commission has asked whether or not we want to have members appointed to that group as well. We've indicated yes, and we'll be working on that in the near term. The timeline associated with the action is there for you to see as well, taking us from May 2023 into early 2025. I'm sorry, early 2026. And with that, I'll stop. Any questions or comments?
Any questions, Adam?
I note the appoint council members during the August 2023 meeting. Is there anything leadership could do to consider moving that forward? Because the first FMAT PDT meeting is already next week. And I wouldn't want them to be excluding this work group because it's not fully populated.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Adam. I forgot to mention that. So there was a little bit of a communication issue here with this document. We've already started that process to identify who those council members are going to be. So that's with, my leadership basically to figure that out. And we'll announce those appointments in the near term and hopefully before that meeting. Anything else? Okay. Zipping right along. The next thing on the tab is the NRCC meeting agenda. You can take a look at that. We had a good meeting. Discussed a lot of topics, including safe reports, equity and environmental justice, offshore wind, did have, as I indicated earlier, the conversation about scenario planning, spent a lot of time on that particular topic. Also had conversations like we usually do about stock assessments and some other things. Any questions about that?
Adam?
So the item about the research set aside shift of the RSA program from New England Council to GARFO, should that be anything that should be on our radar with regards to our interest in restarting RSA in the Mid-Atlantic?
So yes, if in fact we end up having RSA program, then that would obviously pertain to us as well. The focus, I think, at the meeting was on the RSA programs that exist through the New England process or the New England Council. Certainly, GARFO or the Science Center could talk about it at this point if they want.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Adam, just to clarify, so the program was moved from the Northeast Fisheries Science Center to GARFO, not the council. So the program had sort of been split operation. Northeast Fisheries Science Center, basically I was the deciding official. We reviewed the grants. A lot of administrative of the program was done from the regional office staff. So Mike and I discussed, having sort of that split responsibility just made it hard on people working in the program. And so we made the decision to move all the NOAA fisheries support for the program to GARFO, but New England Council's role is still the same. And then the Northeast Fisheries Science Center will continue to provide technical reviews and technical advice on the proposals that are submitted and on the projects that are funded. And so if the MID chooses to move in that direction, they would work with GARFO, and the Science Center would similarly support the science of the activity.
Okay, thank you, John. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly regarding RSA, Adam, I think you know this, and other folks around the table may as well. We have been working with the commission to basically identify the next steps relative to RSA. There's a meeting, I think, scheduled sometime in May. It's June, I can't remember, but anyway, there's going to be a meeting of their, it's the ISFMP or executive, policy board. I lose track. Anyway, we will be participating in that meeting, staff, to basically present some information for the commission folks to consider, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation there relative to next steps from a state perspective. Unless there are any more questions, we'll move on. The next on me on the tab is the CCC Council Coordination Committee agenda. A lot of things there as well. Not going to go through those in any detail except for the item that relates to climate change and fisheries. And we're going to be talking about that next, but certainly anything there that you'd like to ask me or Mike or Wes or Mary, who all attended this particular meeting, glad to help you answer those questions. Any comments about the CCC meeting? See any? So next on behind the tab, I'm going to spend a little time with this, just to give you a heads up, because it's an important topic. It's a big deal. And the particular topic, it relates to this NEFSC draft climate governance policy document that you see behind the tab. So at the May 2023 meeting that occurred several weeks ago, the CCC received a presentation on that draft policy. The policy, if you haven't read it yet, provides guidance on how Section 304F Magnuson should be used to determine the geographic scope of fisheries and on how to determine which councils will be responsible for preparing and amending new and/or existing fishery management plans for fisheries that extend or have moved beyond the geographic area of authority of any one council, including those that move across council boundaries. That's a mouthful. So it sounds a little wonky, a little technical, has major implications for what we do, major implications for what we do. The policy was first discussed at the CCC meeting last year. Like I said, we reviewed the draft. Last year, we just got the heads up they were going to be working on the policy. This year, we actually saw the draft. For those that are interested, the PowerPoint presentation that was made at the meeting by NEFSC is included in the briefing book. Take a look at that. I made a number of comments at the most recent meeting regarding the draft. Those are also included in a list of comments that are summarized in the memo. It goes to you today, but certainly take a look at those. And like I indicated earlier, that draft policy is also included behind the memo for you to look at. Last year, when I found out about the policy, I reacted somewhat strongly. The lack of transparency. What I saw was an attempt to supersede what we were doing with our climate and governance initiative. This year, I indicated that we had a number of problems with the draft policy. We had a chance to review it. We had about a week to look at it before the meeting. And again, you can take a look at it and see what kind of comments I made, but or that were made by other folks as well at the meeting. The bottom line was, I think from my perspective, is that, yeah, I understand 304F is something that could be used under the right circumstances, but should be the last thing to be considered relative to all the other possibilities that now exist, as a result of the initiative that we basically led on climate change and scenario planning. They indicated if the policy is implemented the way that we see it now, it could have a significant impact on council operations in Mid-Atlantic fisheries, including the fishermen, communities. Although this is a national policy, it's obvious to many folks that have seen the policy that the specific target of the policy are fisheries in the Northeast. If you, again, had a chance to look at it and think about it, and look at what's being proposed, it's likely at a minimum, you're looking at joint management of squid mackerel butterfish with the New England Council, and possibly joint management of summer flounder, scupping black sea bass as well. The document proposes using commercial revenue or changes in recreational effort to trigger changes in council responsibility. This document says if more than 75% of a fisheries landing revenues accrue to another council's jurisdiction, there's a presumption that NOAA Fisheries will reassign management authority to the other council. Mary or Stephen, could you put up the figure? So we'll talk about this timeline in a minute, but there's a figure, I don't know. I don't want the timeline, Mary, the figure, or Stephen, whoever's in control of the document. No, there's a figure, there's an actual figure, a graph of longfin squid. There it is. So this is an example. So if you take a look at the information that's available for longfin squid, take a look at this particular graph, and you think about that 75%, you think about that 75% marker, then we have exceeded, or New England Council's revenues have exceeded 75% last couple of years. It's approaching 80%. So, you know, what we've talked about relative to this particular metric or this particular way of looking at changing council authority would put, again, longfin squid in that particular situation. Document says if between 40 and 75% of the fisheries landings revenues accrue to another council's jurisdiction, there's a presumption that NOAA will assign joint management authority to the two councils. So that's It's the basis of my earlier comment. At a minimum, we're looking at joint management authority if in fact this policy is implemented the way that you see it today. Now you can put up that other slide, Stephen. So here's the timeline for what we are proposing. We basically are in a situation where NIMS has indicated that they're accepting comments on the policy until November 17th, with the goal of finalizing and rolling out the policy in the summer of 2024. The CCC is planning to submit a joint letter to NIMS regarding the policy. This is our plan, staff plan for developing comments and council review. That's included in a memo that's attached as a supplement to the executive director report tab. So take a look at that. But here it is, basically, here we are in June. We're having preliminary discussions. In mid-July, we'd like to get our SSC involved. And I've started working with Brandon to actually get that going so that we can get feedback on the metrics and the information, some of the technical information that's included in the policy document. In August, the council will review the draft letter, comments that we received from the SSC. September, we'll polish up that letter, get it submitted to NIMS, hopefully by early October. And we're doing it early because NIMS has asked that they get the comments sooner rather than later. So we're not going to wait till the November 17th deadline. So there's a lot there. I think at this point, I'll stop and see if there's any comments. Certainly, it'd be nice to hear that, in fact, what you see in front of you for the timeline is something that you would endorse. Stop. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I saw Peter Hughes first, Michelle, and then I'll come back to you. Peter?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is pretty concerning. It's a little stomach churning, actually. If you go back to the squid, long fin squid slide that you had up, if you could put that slide back up, it's actually pretty misleading in the sense that, you know what, maybe 2/3 of those boats that harvested those squid were from squid in the mid-Atlantic region, but they went to the port of least resistance. And the port of least resistance, I mean, they didn't have to steam 200 miles to the south to go unload in their home port, yet went to that and spend all that money on fuel down and back up, and 2 days on the water, down and back up. It's actually very misleading in that sense because credit for those landings should go to those mid-Atlantic vessels. Shouldn't necessarily be where those vessels unload, because you know what? We unload a lot of squid up there, but we take possession of the squid. It unloaded up in New England, but we take possession of the squid. It's our squid. So it's very misleading, and until real efforts and analysis are done to drill down on that. And, you know, another example is sea scallops. Sea scallops right now are managed by New England, but there have been times in the past where a lot of landings take place down in the mid-Atlantic region because of where the rotational fishing areas are. Now, those landings don't necessarily surpass New Bedford's landings or Massachusetts landings, but they are significant, and we are significant contributors to the monies that are fed into New England states because those are the ports of least resistance. I don't have to have a boat that steams 38 hours, 48 hours out to George's Banks, closed area 2, and have to bring that boat all the way home. I need to go to the port of least resistance. I mean, look at the economical fuel savings, just look at the, use the buzzword, carbon footprint of having to bring all those boats home. So I think it needs, I think it needs more analysis in that sense. And those are my initial knee-jerk reaction. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I saw some hands go up during your comments, Peter, so let me go to Chris and then Mike and then Michelle, if you can hold off for just a second. We'll address Peter's comments at this point.
Thank you,
Chris.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, just quickly, Peter, many of the things that you said are the comments that were made for our initial, the comments also were made in response to NIFSC when we saw the draft as initial reaction. But like you said, I think the best thing for us to do at this point is to step back and have the SSC look at it, right? And take a hard look at, okay, is revenue, commercial revenue, the way that this thing should work? Recreational effort, the way that it's defined in this policy, is that the way it should work? Is this 75%, 40%, marker, the way that it should really trigger? Should those be the markers that trigger anything? So there's a lot there. Yeah, there's a lot of concern, like you said. A lot of folks are once they understand what's in here, I think you're gonna have the same reaction that you had, which is a churning stomach. There's a lot of stuff here that gonna potentially impact us for decades. This thing is implemented the way that it reads now.
Mike Penny?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I'll note in preface, I wasn't an author on this draft policy, although I did weigh in with some comments on an earlier draft. But just a couple things that I think hopefully sort of set the stage and a little bit of context as I understand and interpret the intent of the policy here. I think, for one thing, this isn't directed just at existing FMPs already assigned to councils. The intent of this policy is written in a way that could apply, and it's written in a way such that it could apply to a new fishery. And how does the agency make a decision about a new fishery that is currently unmanaged? What factors should it look at? How does it make a determination whether that fishery should be managed by Council A, Council B, Council C, or a joint FMP? So some of the criteria in here, for example, the 75% revenue, is just an initial indication of where it might likely end up in terms of if we're assigning a new fishery to a council for an FMP. The other thing is that those criteria are intended to be initial triggers for review, not the basis on which a final decision would be solely based. In other words, if you look at the longfin squid example, if that was used to determine that we should take a look at that fishery, how is that fishery being managed? There would be a number of factors that would be incorporated into that review, some of which are listed in the document itself. Additional considerations, infrastructure such as vessels, dealers, ports that fish for, catch, purchase, process, and otherwise handle the product. Management efficiency, need for conservation and management. So there are a number of factors the agency, I expect, would use in making a recommendation to the Secretary before any changes were made. Certainly one of the factors, and this is something that Chris mentioned, this council truly has been the leader in the scenario planning effort that we've done looking at climate change and the impacts of how we manage the governance structures for our fisheries. So, the existing management structures and the governance structures and how the councils involved are recognizing and potentially adapting their management systems to account for any shifts would be another factor that would be considered. And so, while I sort of understand the initial kind of knee-jerk reaction that's been mentioned to sort of like be very reactionary to this, I would advise, just suggest that the council try to look at this with a little bit more open-mindedness in terms of how could the agency, to make things better, how could the agency use the process that already exists under the Magnuson Act for both assigning new fisheries to a council jurisdiction or potentially making changes if and when those are necessary. Recognizing that, the existing council structures go quite far in addressing a lot of the concerns and needs of the fishermen. And certainly, one of the comments that you raised, Peter, about like where are the vessels hailing from? They might be landing in state X, but they hail from state Y. And how does that factor in? I think those are certainly relevant comments that should be forwarded on as part of the council's consideration. But I would just, don't get too hung up on the specific criteria as the only things that would be used to make a definitive determination and to make a substantial change.
Peter?
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. That was one roll aid of many roll aids to come, it sounds like a little bit. But is longfin squid considered a new fishery or an emerging fishery? I mean, it's a historical fishery. I could see where maybe thread herring might be a new fishery, where they might have to pick and choose between which, area or council it falls under. But, this is a historical fishery with, a lot of years underneath of it. And I would also say, and I'm going to quote Janet Coit from Tuesday's congressional hearing on whales and the vessel speed restrictions. It is important to emphasize that this is only a proposal. We know how proposals go. It's only a proposal, but we'll see how far it goes with that. And kind of, I feel the same way with this. It might only be in that stage right now where we're testing the waters but something's going to come. So.
All right, thanks, Peter. Mike? Okay, Michelle, I'm going to get to you. Chris, did you have a direct response?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I appreciate your comments, Mike. You emphasize new fisheries, but in the first paragraph of this policy, it talks about existing fishery management plans. So I understand the emphasis that you made on fisheries, but we also have to be concerned relative to this policy about existing fisheries and the fisheries that we manage.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, Michelle, we're finally to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was aware of the development of this policy, but hadn't really, I knew it was swirling around, but hadn't paid much attention to it. So appreciate, the timeline that Chris has laid out for development of comments. I support that. I find myself agreeing with many of the concerns that were raised by the CCC with respect to thresholds and triggers and timeframes over which, to evaluate things. 3-year average seems a little, I just think something, like that is going to, I would argue that a 3-year average is frequent as opposed to not frequent, considering that's how we evaluate, our recreational harvest against ACLs. But appreciate Mr. Penny's comments on this as well. I do think that, one of the things that's probably gonna scare a lot of folks is, the mention of a transition plan for permitting and allocation issues. I think there's, fisheries participants have expressed, concerns over even just thinking about, a new approach to ecosystem-based fisheries management and how that might affect permits. So I can only imagine what reading this is gonna do. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Chris Batsavage?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, great, thanks. I agree with the comments regarding concerns over this policy that's already been made. Question for Chris. What was the reaction of some of the other council executive directors to this policy? Knowing that if fish are moving out of different jurisdictions, like the South Atlantic Council, seems like fish are just kind of leaving their waters And yeah, I'm sure there's some issues possibly going on in other regions. So just wondering what some of the other executive directors thought about this draft policy. Thanks.
Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did have some comments from the East Coast councils at the CCC meeting. The other councils were relatively silent on the policy, emphasizing the point that this policy is going to impact East Coast fisheries the most. In terms of New England, I think Eric's on the line. He could speak to the comments that he made at the meeting. Some of those are included in the comments that we've listed in the memo. The South Atlantic Council did make some comments as well. One of the concerns that were expressed that relates to East Coast management and the councils was the difference between the Northeast and the Southeast, and the fact that the data collection, the surveys are different. So thinking about how the policy might impact East Coast fisheries in that particular aspect was something that was brought up as well. So not a lot of comments yet. Again, we just had initial reactions at the CCC because this thing was just released for us to look at. I expect that those councils will be making, sending in specific comment letters as well.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Joe, we'll wrap it up with Joe.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Chris, just to that last point, all the commissions met, state directors for the commissions met last year. And I felt that same kind of, the Gulf didn't seem too concerned, and there were definitely very different and less issues for the Pacific as well. So this impacts our coast much more. I do feel for NOAA on trying to draft something. I think triggers are important as triggers, and I would like to see something developed, but there's just so much nuance. So I share all the concerns that have been expressed, and just to your question to us, I fully support the timeline as is and look forward to participating and helping form comments.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And given the timeline and our constraints on time, I think at this point I'm going to move on. There will be opportunity for the council to review this even further and have further discussion on it. Greg, you have comment? Yeah, we'll take one comment from the public. I've got Greg DiDomenico, and then we are going to move on.
Just a question to Dr. Moore. Chris, just to get this correct, did you say the least that could happen would be joint management?
Based on our interpretation of the way that the policy document is drafted now, yes.
What's the worst thing?
For those species that I mentioned, squid mackerel, butterfish, perhaps summer flounder, scupping black sea bass as well.
What's the worst thing that could happen?
Transfer of management authority to New England.
For black sea bass, fluke, scup?
Could be, if you look at the information I provided, longfin, squid mackerel, butterfish. Doesn't look like summer flounder, scupping black sea bass would fall in that category, but those other species would potentially. Over time, if the trends that we see for some of these species continue, that could be a likely event.
Wow. Okay. Well, this potentially completely devalues the investment that shoreside people like Lunds have made for the last 20 years. That's really, really frightening. I've been doing this 23 years. I've never said, what do I do when I go home to tell, my people, so to speak. But at this point, honestly, between our MSC certifications and our shoreside freezing capacity and our continued investment in keeping people employed in Cape May and some other places, I have to say this is a tremendous potential threat, and it devalues everything that Lunds has done. So, well, there's not much more to say than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Chris, did you have anything else under your tab today?
I do. I'll go quick. Last on this particular topic, I want to point out that as far as we know, NEFSC is not planning any stakeholder outreach regarding the draft guidance. So it's likely that the Mid-Atlantic Council We'll facilitate comments and feedback from our stakeholders and incorporate those into our comment letter, send that in as a separate package. So that's it for this topic. Interestingly enough, this week I received an email from someone associated with Senator Richard Blumenthal, indicating that they would like us to comment on a draft bill. It's titled Supporting Healthy Interstate Fisheries in Transition, or the SHIFT Act. That draft bill, that email was sent to the council earlier this week, I think yesterday. Mary had a chance to look at that particular document. She provided us, she sent put together a memo for me. It's to me from Mary, dated June 7th. So in that document, you see the overview of that act, what that could potentially mean for the council and commission. So we've been asked to provide comments. It's somewhat unusual. Typically, we don't get a lot of those from Senate staffers on draft bills. Because they asked us, we can provide comments. Remember, we're not allowed to lobby. So certainly them asking then opens the door for us to provide comments. I sent an email back to the individual indicating that I would bring it up with you all today, this week. Also indicated that it might be a good idea to reach out to the other councils to see if they wanted to provide comment. Last but not least, I asked when do you want our comments by? And I haven't received anything yet regarding that question. With that, Mr. Chair, I think that takes care of everything that I had on my list, and I'll take any questions or comments.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Anything else for Chris? Okay, seeing none, I do have one hand from the public. Bonnie Brady.
Hi, Bonnie Brady, Long Island Commercial Fishing Association. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, very quickly in regard to the draft guidance and no public comment. On the flip side of the years of investment New York fishermen have, and I've said this in the past, but I want to make sure it's on the record, they have spent huge sums of money in order to purchase permits for other states in order to be able to take regulatory discard and turn it into landings, and any attempt to change, switch, or join councils because of the issue of more fish in a certain area will have a dramatic effect on them. I understand what the processors are saying, but also from the fishermen's perspective, they've spent their livelihoods trying their best to be able to maintain their business. And it's really important that all of those comments are in. I don't know how, I don't know if a webinar, I don't know which way you could make it done, but there needs to be a lot of ability for the public to comment. If New York, perhaps. Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. Seeing no other hands at this time. Thanks, Chris, for your report. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to take a break. I'm going to look down the table to John. John had some timing limitations. Would you be all right with a 10-minute break, or would you rather go now? Sure, of course. Yeah. So before we take a quick break, I'm going to turn to NOAA's Office of General Counsel, John Almeida, for his report. John, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Counsel, for indulging me with my time restrictions here. There's a new case challenging the Council's harvest control rule, recreational harvest control rule, Natural Resources Defense Council v. Raimondo. This has been filed in the District of Columbia, and at this point, we're in the early stages. We have a deadline of June 23rd for filing the answers to the complaint and getting the administrative record filed. We have the, you may recall the challenge to the Mid-Atlantic Council's Commercial Recreation Allocation Amendment, Lofstad v. Raimondo. This is filed in the District of New Jersey. This is the case where the plaintiffs are arguing that the council process violates the Constitution's Appointments Clause. So this is a constitutional argument. Both sides have filed their opening summary judgment briefs, and under the current schedule, it'll be fully briefed before the court at the end of July. And in the summer flounder case filed by the state of New York, we have had oral argument before the Second Circuit on May 24th. So that case is fully briefed, argument's done. We're just waiting for a decision out of the Second Circuit. Turning to right whale litigation, you may recall a case filed earlier this winter by the Massachusetts Lobstermen's Association challenging an emergency rule that closed a wedge area between the Massachusetts state closure and the federal closure area. There was a hearing where the plaintiffs were seeking a temporary restraining order, and the court denied that request. And then there wasn't much more activity in the case. And then the closure ended, and the court dismissed the case on mootness ground because that emergency rule is no longer in effect. So that case is over and done with. The Maine Lobstermen's Association case, this is a challenge in the District of Columbia to the batched fisheries biological opinion as it relates to the lobster fishery. That case, you may recall, the NIFS won in the district court. It went up on appeal to the DC Circuit, and now that appeal has been fully briefed. There was oral argument in February, and we're just waiting for a decision. During the pendency of this appeal, Congress enacted the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which included provisions relating to the future regulation of the American lobster and Jonah crab fisheries with regards to the right whales and the MMPA. And so as part of this appeal, NIMS filed a motion to dismiss based on these provisions, these new provisions of law. That motion is now wrapped up in the merits of the appeal. And again, we're waiting for a decision out of the DC Circuit. Meanwhile, in the other case in the District of Columbia, the Conservation Law Foundation Center for Biological Diversity case before Judge Boasberg, you may recall that we had NIFS had an adverse ruling on the merits in July, and we ended the remedy order in November. And again, with the new legal provisions in the Consolidated Appropriations Act kind of changing the legal landscape, NIMS filed a motion to dismiss this case in May of this year in light of those new provisions. The plaintiffs and interveners filed a motion to stay consideration of this motion. So asking the judge not to take up the decision on the motion to dismiss, which Judge Boasberg granted earlier this week. So the briefing on that motion to dismiss is on hold till after we get a ruling in that Maine Lobstermen's Association appeal from the DC Circuit. So it's a little complicated, but at this point, we're just waiting for the DC Circuit to rule, and then that'll have implications as to the district court decision, district court litigation before Judge Boasberg as well. And then the final case I'm going to report on, you might have read about this in the newspapers, the Loper Bright litigation. This was a challenge to the New England Council's industry-funded monitoring amendment. And the NIFS won in the district court, and then won in the DC Circuit as well. The plaintiffs in that case filed a petition for review from the Supreme Court, and on May 1st, the Supreme Court granted that petition. So it's a rare thing that one of our cases goes before the Supreme Court, and this one is. So, we're looking at briefing probably over the summer with argument, if the court wants to hear argument at some point in the fall. So stay tuned for that one. And that's all I have for my report. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thanks, John. Anyone have any questions for John regarding the report? Okay, seeing none. Thanks, John, for your report. Might have to buy a new suit. You need to get up in front of the Supreme Court. Be a little fancy there.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a historic event, so a new suit might be in order.
Yeah. All right, let's take a 10-minute break, come back at 11:15, and we'll wrap things up for this morning. Thank you. Okay, everyone, this is your 1-minute warning. We're going to start up in just a minute or two. Okay, welcome back, everyone, from that short break. We're going to go ahead and pick up with the rest of our organization and liaison reports before we adjourn for the day. The first report I have on my list is NOAA Fisheries Greater Atlantic Regional Fisheries Office. Got Mike Petney for his GARFO report. Mike?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. First off, just with thanks to the crack team back at GARFO that was listening in, I have numbers for Wes's question about EFPs we've issued. Last year in 2022, we issued 84. Thus far in 2023, we have issued 50, just for context. Now onto my report. For spiny dogfish, you probably know this, on May 3rd, we published final catch specs for the 2023 Atlantic spiny dogfish fishery, consistent with the recommendations of the Mid-Atlantic and New England councils. These specs reduced the ABC by 55% from fishing year 22, based on recent declining trends in biomass and productivity. So the resulting commercial quota is 12 million pounds, which is a 59% decrease from 2022. The action makes no other changes to management measures such as trip limits, and that rule is effective on May 1st. We've already talked about Amendment 23, the Black Sea Bass Commercial State Allocation Amendment. I just would note that our decision date on that amendment is August 2nd, so expect to hear our final decision on that before the August council meeting. Moving on to some cost recovery issues. First, surf clam and ocean quahog. On May 25th, we sent cost recovery bills to surf clam and ocean quahog ITQ quota shareholders based on the number of their 2022 cage tags that were used. Payment on those bills is due June 24th, and the payment is submitted through the pay.gov website. More recently, June 5th, earlier this week, we announced the 2023 tag fees, which are going to be $1.21 per surf clam tag and 66 cents per quahog tag. The cost recovery bills that we issue in 2024 will be based on these fees multiplied by the number of tags used this year, 2023. It's kind of a leapfroggy type approach. Both fees have increased from the 2022 fees, which will result in some changes in our recoverable costs as well as the number of tags used. Similar with the Tilefish IFQ cost recovery program, we issued bills on May 11th for the 2022 calendar year. Quota shareholders have until June 25th to pay the balance due. The cost recovery fee percentage was 0.7613, well below the 3% maximum allowed by the Magnuson-Stevens Act. The details about the recoverable costs will be available in the IFQ cost recovery report, which has been sent to the council and is available on request. And again, the cost recovery, the recoverable costs increased for the tilefish fishery as well. It was basically a general increase overall in our recoverable costs. We did an internal audit looking at our process and discovered that there were a number of costs that should have been recovered that were not. And so we're not going back in time to recover those costs, but we are making adjustments moving forward in terms of what costs we are recovering, and that is resulting in an increase from 2023 forward. Moving on to the New England Council's Groundfish FMP, on May 31st, we published the proposed rule for Framework 65, which would set specifications for the groundfish fishery for this fishing year, which actually began May 1st. The comment period on the proposed rule closes June 15th, and then once that comment period closes, we'll be working to get the approved measures implemented as soon as possible. To make sure that the sectors could actually operate, on May 1st, we published the final rule approving their 2023 and 2024 sector operations plans, including a number of regulatory exemptions. They're fishing under default specs from May 1st, and which are in place until October 31st, and we'll have Framework 65 in place well in advance of that. On April 18th, we published a proposed rule for the fishing year 2023 recreational measures for Georges Bank cod, as well as Gulf of Maine cod and haddock. Mostly these affect recreational anglers in the Gulf of Maine. But of note, we proposed implementing the council recommended measures for Georges Bank and Gulf of Maine cod, but deviated slightly from the council's recommendations to propose what we call mode-based measures for Gulf of Maine haddock, where we would set different size and bag limits for the for-hire fleet and for the private anglers. The comment period for that rule closed on May 3rd, and we're working on the final rule to get that out and get those measures implemented as soon as possible. For Atlantic herring, on May 11th, we published a temporary rule implementing a 2,000-pound possession limit in herring management area 3, which was effective on May 14th. We did that. The herring regulations require that we implement this possession limit adjustment once we project that landings will reach 98% of the sub-ACL. If the final fishery data indicate that we exceeded the sub-ACL, the amount of the overage may be deducted from the fishing year 2025 area 3 sub-ACL and overall ACL. So that regulation, the new possession limit's in place through the end of the calendar year. On April 26th, we published a proposed rule for Framework Adjustment 13 to the monkfish FMP. And we recall this was something that we took multiple actions of both councils to look at a revised ABC recommendation from the New England Council's SSC. So our proposed rule is consistent with the recommendations of the councils. The fishing year began on May 1st, but with no change to management, we'll have a comment period closed for the action for the proposed rule on May 11th, and we'll be getting the final rule out here very soon. Also on monkfish, but related to research set-aside, 2 applications have been selected for the 2023-2024 monkfish research set-aside competition. One from the Cornell Cooperative Extension, looking at developing a standardized catch per unit effort time series. Then another project by the Cape Cod Commercial Fishermen's Alliance, which would also be looking at incorporating fishermen's knowledge to develop a standardized catch per unit effort index for the gillnet fishery. So both applications are pending final approval by NOAA's Grant Management Division, and they're 2-year projects that would receive 851 days at sea out of 1,000 RSA days at sea that are available. Also on a research program, the Bycatch Reduction Engineering Program, applications that were submitted under this program for 2023 are under review by our headquarters Office of Sustainable Fisheries. We expect the award announcement within the next 2 months. Last item I have, also grant related, the 2024 Salt and Stall Kennedy Grant Program competition is currently open and accepting pre-proposals through July 24th. So if you're interested in seeking funding for a project under that program, please consider getting your pre-proposal in relatively soon. Just noting that the 3 priorities this year are promotion and marketing, development, infrastructure, and capacity building, and third, science or technology that enhances sustainable U.S. fisheries. So this year's solicitation, there are two kind of pronged approach. All interested applicants must submit a 2-page pre-proposal. That's what's due by July 24th. And then applicants that are interested in submitting a full application after the pre-proposal review process must submit their full application through grants.gov. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, but I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike on his report? Okay, seeing none at this time. Appreciate the report, Mike. Next, we're going to go to the Science Center. We have Dr. John Hare. John, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll start with surveys. As I imagine everybody knows, our bottom trawl survey was delayed, and then we were only able to complete partial coverage. We successfully completed 17 days of the 60 days. And on those 17 days, we were only able to work 12-hour watches instead of 24-hour watches. So we completed 70 of 377 planned stations. We sent out sort of our post-survey report. I think that went out this morning. So Chris, is probably in your email box, and that can be distributed to the council. The lost days on Bigelow were due initially to vessel maintenance and getting the vessel out of the yard. And then obviously the ability to only work 12-hour watches was due to staff limitations on the vessel. Similarly, the scallop survey on the research vessel Sharp has been delayed by a vessel hour issue. And we've already lost leg 1. Vessel repair started at the end of May, but as they fixed one issue, they found additional issues. So they're still working to get the Sharp functional, and our staff have a meeting with the University of Delaware on Friday to sort of see what's going on with the vessel and see what we can make of it. We do have some days scheduled on Bigelow. The intent of those days was to evaluate Bigelow as a platform to deploy HabCam and to do sea trials with an autonomous vehicle the Science Center has developed that has HabCam on it, but would not require a ship. So it's not going to make up for the lost days on Sharp, but it is planned to support the scallop survey. We have been working with the research set-aside program, the scallop research set-aside program, to see what sort of additions can be made by scientists involved in that program to help cover some of the areas that we are likely to miss on our scallop survey. And this is really sort of, obviously, we talked about this last council meeting, you know, we need to have contingencies for all of these occurrences. With Bigelow, we have sort of these unpredictable occurrences, which, while they're unpredictable, they have become predictably common. So we need to have contingencies for what to do if there are maintenance or staff issues on the boat. As I've also mentioned, there's a midlife repair coming up for Bigelow in 2027, 2028. Hasn't been scheduled explicitly yet, but that's a 12 to 18-month offline. So that's a 2 to 3 bottom trawl surveys offline. So we need to know what we're going to do sort of for that midlife repair. And then the offshore wind energy development in the region construction has started in Vineyard Wind. We do not anticipate that the NOAA vessels will be able to work in those wind energy areas. So we're going to need contingencies for that. So we've got a couple of different efforts underway at the center, actively working to build these plans for what do we do if, when. So we've got our offshore wind plans. You heard Katie Westfall talk yesterday. We're developing a survey-specific mitigation plan for bottom trawl survey and for all our surveys. And then particularly around Bigelow, we've started conversations about how we're going to handle that midlife repair and what can we do in the future if we have an unpredictable decrease in the availability of the vessel. With Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel, the next NTAP meeting is July 20th in Baltimore. We have our Bigelow contingency planning on the agenda, so we'll get some feedback and be able to work with NTAP on those plans. The restrictor rope field study has been completed, and a manuscript is being developed by the NTAP group. The intent of that work was to see if the trawl geometry could be standardized using a restrictor rope, and then if using that restrictor rope, does that affect catch? So those results will be forthcoming. And I think there is a lot of potential value for NTAP to be wholly engaged in the contingency planning around Bigelow, potentially planning around our other surveys, and to help sort of work so we can work together to come up with strategies to survey in wind energy areas in a way that it supports our federal survey efforts. With regards to the observer program, we have not yet released the NEFSC day schedule. We've sort of trying to get the technical memos through the internal agency review. We are the observer companies have the sort of what we think the schedule is going to be, and they are continuing to deploy observers with an understanding of where that C-Day schedule is likely to be. And starting in April 2024, the industry-funded Scallop Observer Program will transition to the pre-trip notification system. Northeast Center and GARFO are working together to coordinate this change, and have created a website to keep everybody informed. And I can share that website with Chris, who can share with you. And then just as a note, on May 11th, the national COVID-19 public emergency ended. So FMR, our observer program, and the observer service providers are still operating with caution when someone reports symptoms, but providers are no longer required to ask about the health of the captain and crew prior to deployments. And any COVID-19 protocols placed on observers moving forward are going to be specific to individual providers. So sort of that's becoming less of an issue in our observer operations. In terms of the assessment updates, we made some progress at the NRCC working on the schedule. We've made some small adjustments. And though that is posted online, I can make sure that you all have that information. And the research track assessments are continuing to progress. Management track assessments, the AOP in February recommended Atlantic mackerel for a level 1, and bluefish, deep sea red crab, longfin, inshore squid, scup, and summer flounder is level 2, and then spiny dogfish is a level 3, with that management track review being in September. And then we have the AOP meeting on May 22nd, which was just completed, and those are all New England Council species, with that peer review also being in September 2023. Cooperative research updates. The Gulf of Maine bottom longline survey completed its 10th year. So the data from that survey are now starting to be incorporated into assessments as a time series, which is exciting. 2 recent publications highlighting the value of collaborating with members of the fishing community to develop and apply catch per unit effort standardizations. We talked about that a little bit with the monkfish RSA. So Well, one of those projects is building on this work, which has been done with the center. And then we have the SQUID biological sampling program, which focuses on collecting weekly data on longfin squid age, growth, and reproductive biology. That was launched in May in partnership with the council. So we appreciate being able to work together on that. Protected species, we had the tool which is used for the Atlantic large whale take reduction team was peer reviewed end of January, early February. We have gone through, addressed the reviews, and we're preparing to release the peer reviews and our responses. And so they should be looking for that in the next couple of weeks. And then we're also planning to guide future developments for this decision support tool based on the peer-reviewed recommendation. We're going to share these plans at Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Team meeting, which I believe is June 15th. In terms of on-demand gear, the development of on-demand gear, geolocation to reduce gear conflict, and trials with mobile and fixed gear fishermen are progressing. We have a fully ropeless on-demand gear in the Massachusetts and South Island restricted areas, both to assess the ability to retrieve the gear and also see the gear with the trapper application and assess the performance of this equipment. And during these trials, there were no gear conflicts reported. Got a lot going on with wind in the region. First two commercial projects are under construction, as we heard about yesterday. We continue to support the regional office and Office of Protected Resources with technical reviews on many of the projects. We finalized our federal survey mitigation strategy, and we've now put together a team with BOEM to start implementing those actions. And we did receive resources with FY23 to really sort of that are dedicated to the federal survey mitigation effort. We are developing, when we go to the ecosystem assessment, we are developing ecosystem and socioeconomic profiles as part of research track assessments. We've done them for Atlantic cod and for bluefish. There's one also being done for black sea bass. And we will continue sort of developing these socioeconomic profiles to support the stock assessment process. I believe that is it for my report. Just as a note, we do put out monthly science highlights, really short, just sort of descriptions of activities going on at the Science Center. And if you'd like to receive those, you can send me an email and I can make sure you get subscribed. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thanks, John. Appreciate your report. Are there any questions for John? Can anyone see if there's any hands online? I lost my screen. No hands online at this time. Appreciate the report, John. Okay, next we're going to turn to NOAA's Office of Law Enforcement. Caleb Gilbert will be providing that report. I did see Caleb online just a little while ago. Caleb, are you with us?
I'm here, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Go ahead with your report. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, council members. Sorry I'm not available to be in person this week. Related to our continued enforcement priorities within the Northeast Division, there's some right whale and observer priority related highlights I'd like to share and start off with this morning. I think I promised at the April meeting that we'd have Atlantic Large Whale Take Reduction Plan, patrol, and compliance stats for all related patrols in the second quarter FY23 as we provided for past meetings, but those are delayed. I will definitely share those stats, although I realize they're more New England centric in our oral report to the council in August and in the third quarter written report to the council when that's available. NED's second quarter take reduction plan and seasonal management area speed rule associated activities such as patrols and operations are carefully outlined in the second quarter OLE written report prepared for this meeting. I saw that's online. Thanks, Mary. And so far in the third quarter FY23 take reduction plan and SMA speed rule patrols and operations are as follows. 2 enforcement officers conducted a 3-day right whale speed operation in the Port of New York alongside New York Department of Environmental Conservation and U.S. Coast Guard Investigative Service. In the second week of April, a total of 15 vessels were checked for speed violations using AIS and MARPA and Doppler, which is basically just handheld radar. No violations were documented. In the third week of April, a special agent coordinated a 3-day interagency vessel speed enforcement operation in the Cape Cod Bay and the off-Race Point seasonal management areas. The operation coincided with the presence of right whales in Cape Cod Bay, U.S. Coast Guard stations Cape Cod Canal, Provincetown, and Air Station Cape Cod, along with Mass Environmental Police, dedicated multiple vessels and an aircraft to conduct patrol hours over the 3-day op. Incidentally, one lobster trawl was inspected for take reduction plan compliance during the op, and that trawl was found to be non-compliant. Last, in the second week of May, 2 enforcement officers, 2 of our special agents, 2 Mass Environmental Police officers, and multiple U.S. Coast Guard D1 personnel participated in multiple patrols conducted over a 3-day long op. Then vessels patrolled during that op between Provincetown and the north end of the Cape Cod Canal, and 1 SMA violation was documented during that op. Related to speed enforcement case processing, sworn staff continue to work on calendar year 22-23 SMA violations, but going back to the 21-22 season, NOAA assessed over $700,000 in penalties across 46 cases total originating from that season. Please see the section in our second quarter written report starting on page 6, dedicated to summarizing vessel speed enforcement violations in that season, the 21-22 SMA season. Briefly, I'll say now that out of those 46 cases, 25 involved recreational pleasure craft. Craft type, I believe I've mentioned previously, is responsible for the majority of the speed rule violations we've identified. We also broke down cases by country of origin of the violating vessel in the written report. The majority of vessels were U.S. flagged. However, 14 cases involved vessels flagged from other countries, and you can see the breakdown of all the information on those cases that we're able to provide publicly in the written report. As I mentioned to the council at the April meeting, OLE sworn staff responded to numerous whale and dolphin strandings along the Mid-Atlantic and southern New England coast in the second quarter FY23. Details of those efforts are listed in the written report. Fortunately, so far this quarter, I believe we've only responded to 1 stranding event. Also related to right whale conservation efforts, our investigative support program staff continue to send out VMS messages to vessels identified to be in the vicinity of right whales. In the first week of April, staff sent 31 messages to vessels in Cape Cod Bay, south of Nantucket and east of Cape Cod, where whales were spotted then. Then the week after, we sent messages to another 44 vessels identified to be in the vicinity of right whales spotted within and around Cape Cod Bay and east of Cape Cod, and a total of 90 related VMS alerts. Our investigative support program staff have sent out to commercial fishing vessels so far in the third quarter. Moving on to our observer priority. So far in the third quarter, our second quarter activities are obviously carefully documented in our written report. In the third quarter, our Division II special agents and some of our Division II special agents and enforcement officers attended an observer roundtable meeting at the Wall, New Jersey field office in early April. Topics covered then include how we respond to reports of observer-related violations and how those cases flow to OLE. Sworn staff discussed recent issues they've encountered in the area, difficult parts of the job, how we handle requests for assistance to conduct outreach at specific ports, the VOC list, etc. Later in April, a special agent attended an advanced sexual assault investigations training hosted by the Plainville, Mass. Police Department. That's in furtherance of our staff gaining more training and on handling the sexual assault or sexual harassment, SASH, component of our observer cases. This training enhanced the participants' knowledge on more specific topics such as the various types of rapists, identifying and dealing with each of them, re-interviewing a victim, and tactfully addressing inconsistency where the victim may be withholding information or the truth. Also related to SASH, NOAA Fisheries published a notice on preventing observer harassment designed to be easily printed out and displayed publicly. The notice highlights observer safety on board commercial fishing vessels, in particular SASH. It also provides resources and guidance to owners and operators to help avoid SASH among observers. We linked that notice to the written report on page 13 if anyone's interested. Our Observer Program Liaison was an active participant of the Observer Support Panel for the May and April BASE plus NEFOP trainings. The goal of the panel is to present and describe the support system that exists for observers should conflict or incidents at sea arise. The panel members who led the discussions are part of the OLE Northeast Fisheries Science Center U.S. Coast Guard team who strive to support a culture of safety for all observers. And last, both our Observer Program Liaison and I continue to work together following up on requests from the Northeast Fisheries Sciences Fisheries Monitoring and Operations Branch on targeted compliance assistance with specific members of the fishing community in specific areas of interest. Also mentioned that we continue to work on enforcement outside of our core priorities. Enforcement officer in the U.S. Coast Guard conducted a dockside trawl inspection using the newly approved Omega gauge. This is one of the first inspections where NOAA U.S. Coast Guard coordinated utilizing the gauge in the field. The gauge produced consistent readings, resulting in mesh size found to be 0.05 inches undersized, and the net officers inspected on that occasion. I'll also mention that we continue to follow up on state referrals for recreational blue line tilefish related violations, and I hope to be able to provide a detailed breakdown of related closed cases at a future meeting. And EO did follow up on one related referral involving a rec fisher's failure to report blue line tilefish last week. And last, I'd like to mention our FY 23-27 enforcement priorities that went out for public comment back in April. I think I mentioned earlier as well at the last meeting. Our final priorities document outlining our priorities over the next 5 years should be publicly available any day now. We will likely message those priorities in a document in a web story, but please reach out to me if you'd like that document when it becomes available. On that or any other topic, email is always a great way to reach me. And that, I think, covers everything I wanted to tell the council this morning, but I'm certainly available for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. Let me look around and see if anyone has any questions for you. Any questions for Caleb at this time? Adam?
Thank you for the report. Would you characterize the need for law enforcement's effort to focus on speed restrictions violations as minor, moderate, or major in terms of impacting your ability to do fisheries enforcement?
I'm not sure I follow the question. It takes up a great deal of our time. We're allocating a tremendous amount of resources to engage in speed rule related enforcement patrols and operations. Does that answer your question, Adam?
So would it be fair then to say that the significant amount of time you're spending on speed restrictions is definitely taking away from your ability to do enforcement at those times on fisheries violations?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question. There's no way we are staff limited, resource limited. So we are conducting operations and patrols for all fisheries violations as we can, but certainly dedicating the amount of time and resources we are towards right whale conservation takes away from other priorities or other fisheries related enforcement activities. So we can't do everything, but we try to. But we right now our priorities are right whales and observers, and we're doing everything else that we can in between. And that's why I've been trying at the last couple of council meetings to highlight some of our other related efforts, because those are ongoing. We're continuing to follow up on all of our state JEA referrals. We're we're down on the docks. If we encounter a fisheries-related violation, we went down to the docks to, you know, inspect for take reduction plan, gear compliance, but we saw, you know, undersized fish in a particular fishery. We're not going to ignore that.
Okay, thanks, Caleb. I don't see any other hands. Caleb, you did say that it would be good to reach out to you via email. I had somebody from my staff here in Maryland reach out or ask me some questions about representation on OLE down in our region. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll drop an email to you when I get back to work this week or early next week, and I'll try to connect you with the folks on my staff that had those questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Anytime, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. All right, moving on. We have one more report under organization reports. Lieutenant Commander Matt Cayley is going to give us the U.S. Coast Guard report. Matt, whenever you're ready.
Morning, everyone, and thanks, Mr. Chair. From the Coast Guard, the past 2 months, District 5 has, our enforcement units conducted about 84 fisheries boardings. It's a little less compared to what we've done last year, and it's less cumulatively by about 100 boardings or so. This is mostly due to our competing mission demands. We're still sending some of our fast response cutters down to support the migrant surge off of Florida over the past couple of months, and we still haven't seen any signs of that slowing down. So some of our resources are devoted down there, which is taken away from the boardings that we normally do up in District 5. Of the boardings that we did conduct, we saw an increase in the recreational fishery boardings, which is kind of consistent with the historical seasonal trends that we see. Definitely picked up for HMS, Dolphin, Wahoo, and the pelagics a little further south off in North Carolina for some of our units down there. The fishery boardings that we did do, we didn't have any violations reported during this period. We also had a protected species response. Station Manasquan Inlet up in New Jersey, they encountered an entangled juvenile humpback whale about a mile off the station, and the boat crew was able to cut the line, and the whale swam away with no signs of further distress, which was good. We conducted 2 operations during this period. One was our ongoing efforts for the right whale speed management area with Operation Right Speed, focused on ensuring that the vessels that are 65 feet and larger are compliant with the restrictions. We conducted about 21 hailouts to vessels that we observed going above the speed restrictions. Some of those were in Delaware Bay area, as well as Virginia. We also conducted a illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing operation on the high seas between the U.S. and Bermuda and EEZs. The operation was really geared toward targeting foreign flag fishing vessels that were suspected of violating provisions of ICAT, the International Commission for Conservation of Atlantic Tunas. There's currently no high seas boarding and inspection authority, so we're a little bit restricted in what we can do as far as boardings go. We have to request flag state approval to get on board, which we haven't had any success with that. But what we were able to accomplish, we were able to query a couple of vessels that were out there and continue to build our maritime domain awareness in the region. And we didn't observe any foreign flag fishing vessels that were close to our EEZ, which is a positive there. On our commercial fishing vessel safety efforts, we've conducted about 90 dockside exams during this period, and about 300 or so for the year. We've issued 66 decals, about 230 for the year, and we had 1 termination, commercial fishing vessel voyage termination to note. We also had a couple of marine casualties that occurred during this time. We had an elision at the end of May for the fishing vessel Miss Kelly that collided with a private dock on about 25 feet or about 25-foot center console, causing it to break free. The local marine detachment in Fort Macon was able to conduct an inspection of the vessel and saw some damage on the starboard hull. The investigation is ongoing. There was a collision at the end of May as well with the Miss Heather. They hit a pilot boat, the Swift. They collided in the vicinity of Newport News Small Boat Harbor. The fishing vessel started to take on a little bit of water, and the 2 people had to be disembarked over to the pilot boat as the vessel sank. That investigation pens. There was also a grounding mid-April of the fishing vessel Ocean Gold, grounded near buoy 12 in Ocean City, Maryland. The vessel was making a wide turn, kind of based on their previous voyage, and they bumped into the shoal and got stuck. And their attempts to get free kind of became further grounded. They were eventually pulled off by a towboat. And then the one termination that we did have, the fishing vessel Veronica Lee's, their voyage was terminated on the York River following a boarding that discovered that they didn't have any buoyant apparatus or survival suits on board, which they're required to have. From our commercial fishing vessel safety information, we continue to do outreach on the dock walks and training and educational efforts, kind of get that word out. And they're also engaged in assisting the fishing partnership support services with, they hosted 2 industry drill conductor courses that were held in New Jersey over this period. And that concludes my report, pending any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate your report. Any questions? Michelle?
Just really quickly, Matt, did you say that you have no high seas boarding authority, but you've never been successful in getting permission to do so? Did I hear that right?
That's correct. Yeah, and I appreciate the question, Michelle. Yeah, so we don't have any high seas boarding inspection authority through the Regional Fishery Management Organization that regulates tuna in that area, which is ICAT. Working with NOAA, they've been doing a great job of trying to push for a high seas boarding and inspection authority through ICAT. Last year, we came pretty close. We had, I think, 1 or 2 countries that weren't supportive of it, but it's closer than what we've ever had before. So they're going to continue to, again, push for that. But yeah, so since we currently don't have any ability to get on board using the high seas boarding inspection through that ICAT, we have to request flag state permission, and we haven't been successful with that yet. So that's one of the challenges that we face there.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And unfortunately, the ICAP process is a major challenge, and I hope you don't look like me by the time with gray hair and 20 years from now, you finally get authority to do that. But yeah, it can be quite a process. Hopefully, because I think that would be an advantage. Honestly, with concerns from that we hear around the table at our CCC meeting, especially having U.S. Coast Guard be able to do boardings in the high seas I think would be a tremendous win, I guess, on that end.
Yeah, I definitely concur with that. And yeah, getting consensus with 56 countries has been a challenge. So hopefully we have something in the next couple of years.
Skip?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quick question, Matt. Boats, vessels, commercial vessels 65 feet and over are required to have AIS. Do you know if that includes private boats or just commercial?
Pretty sure and I had to verify this, but it's 65 feet and vessels 65 feet and greater. I'm pretty sure regardless of what the category there is, whether they're operating commercially or recreationally.
Thank you.
Peter Hughes?
Thanks. Going back to the high seas boarding, how does that work with IUU fishing, or are they two completely, one's HMS, ICAT, understand, or are they two different oversight boards? Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the question. So based on the region that the fish are basically operating in, there's a couple different regional fishery management organizations throughout the world that kind of manage species within that specific area. So for the Western Atlantic, it's ICAT is what manages that species. So in IUU, it's more geared towards vessels that are, what we've seen is foreign flag fishing fleets will come over and fish for species because there's a lack of enforcement in the area, or we're not able to get on board and verify that the vessels that are permitted to fish under ICAT are in compliance with ICAT and their quotas. So that's some of the challenges that we face, but it's the regional fishery management organizations is where the regulatory kind of process that works for the different countries that have quota in the specific area. So like on the West Coast, in the Pacific area, we're a lot further along in our ability to go and do boardings in the IUU mission so for our cutters that are out on the West Coast, they're able to go out and actually board some of the vessels raising the flag of that regional fishery management organization that they're enforcing. Just over on the Atlantic side, we're not as mature yet as what the Pacific side is. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Matt? Okay, seeing none. Matt, we appreciate your report. It's a nice short commute for you today to get home.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
All right, we're going to go ahead and turn next, or lastly, to our liaison reports. I'll start with New England. Peter?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This is the liaison report from the April New England Fishery Management Council meeting. It took place hybrid up in Mystic, Connecticut. Under the Habitat Committee and the northern edge in having to deal with sea scallops, the council adopt the following objectives for the northern edge scallop framework: review current boundaries for the closed area, consider whether modifications might be considered in future action, develop a scallop rotational harvest program, including the geographical extent, duration, and frequency of scallop dredge activity relative to habitat and recovery time on the northern edge, develop management area boundaries that are enforceable. This may include developing additional monitoring requirements specific to this area, and accurately monitor and minimize bycatch of non-target species. The council voted to initiate this action and start a northern edge scallop framework. Under the Monkfish Committee report, the council recommended the formation, as did this one, the formation of a research set-aside committee to improve the Monkfish RSA program. First meeting of the committee actually took place this past Monday, June 5th, that I participated in while I was able to listen in on my way here. And for protected resources, as we heard yesterday, there's no report yet. That council is scheduled to discuss protected resources in regards to sturgeon at their June council meeting, which meets the last week of June. Under the Herring Committee report, which also includes river herring shad, the Herring Committee and council consider at their respective next meetings amending the 2023 council priorities for Atlantic herring to include PDT tasking for analysis to support and identify a range of options for time area closures to avoid and minimize catch of river herring and shad in the midwater trawl and small mash bottom trawl fisheries. They also voted to revisit Amendment 8, the inshore midwater trawl closure. A motion was made that the council commits a draft problem statement to the Herring Committee for further development and refinement, with the intention that the council at its June business meeting takes up the work of the committee on the problem statement. As you may recall, the inshore midwater trawl closure was put into place, and NIMS put it into place, and then there were some legal challenges to it, and it was found to be out of order. As I recall, the judge could not find any indication of localized depletion or any definition of what localized depletion is. That's just one of the pieces of it. In regards to on-demand ropeless gear conflict working group, the council approved a draft work plan for the group, and will be setting up an on-demand fishing gear conflict working group web page to house key documents related to the group's work. I don't know how much that affects us, but it's going to, because there are quite a few lobstermen that fish in the Mid-Atlantic. Skates. The council recommended to the Northeast Fisheries Science Center that the 2023 skate management track assessment include recreational data in the catch time series. They'd like them to evaluate the methods for attributing commercial fishery landings and recreational catch by species, reevaluate the biomass targets for thorny skate, and consider the Gulf of Maine longline survey as a biomass index. Groundfish Committee report, the council took action to submit a letter to GARFO requesting an emergency action to set the Gulf of Maine haddock ABC for fishing year 2023 at 90% FMSY, taking into consideration the council's risk policy, National Standard 1 guidelines for phasing in changes to ABCs and relevant recent fishery independent and dependent information. They also took action to write a letter to the NEFMC, Northeast Fisheries Science Center, and NRCC to include Gulf of Maine haddock as a case study in the state space model research track assessment. We'd received some other presentations, ecosystem-based fishery management. They received an update report on prototype MSE or PMSE to help inform a full-scale MSE to develop an example fishery management plan for Georges Bank. Received a presentation on the Marine Resource Education Program, or MREP, that works to bridge the gap between fishermen and scientists and managers. And we received a congressional update from Mr. Wheatley. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate the report. Any questions for Peter? Sonny?
Just a FYI, I believe Wes and I are on that work group for the, yes. So if any information needs, just go to Wes. Thank you.
We'll go to Wes for information and we'll blame you if something goes wrong. Right, Sonny? Okay, very good. Any other questions for Peter? Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. Thanks, Peter, for your time in New England and your report. Lastly, we have the South Atlantic Council. Oh, I'm sorry. Eric, I'm sorry. I forgot to check online.
No problem, Mike. I appreciate it. And I don't have anything to Mr. Hughes did a fine job, but I just want to let everybody know that our meeting June 27th through 29th in Freeport, Maine is in person. It's also online, but that will be our current executive director's last official meeting with the council. He's been with us a long time, as you all know, and he will certainly be missed. His replacement, Dr. Kate O'Keefe, is going to pick up the reins sometime in late July. So that's what's happening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eric, for that update. Appreciate that. Any other questions for Peter or Eric? Seeing none, that turns us to our South Atlantic Council Liaison Report. Dewey had to step away, and Tim, who was with us this week, has also stepped away. I know that the South Atlantic Council meets next week in St. Augustine. So without either Dewey or Tim here, they did not leave a report behind for us to give. So we'll wait till the next meeting and get that report from the meeting next week. So thank you for that. That takes us to other business. I would like to take this opportunity under other business to recognize Dr. Renee Riley, the back of our room here. Renee recently, I believe, was selected to be the executive director of the Responsible Offshore Science Alliance. And I don't know, Renee, if you had anything you wanted to address the council or just wave, or it's up to you. Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for spending time with us this week. Is there any other new and or continuing business to come before the council at this time? Eric?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just a comment, and I just wanted to, as the chair of the CCC America the Beautiful Subcommittee, I really appreciate Dr. Moore and the council having Ms. Coakley participate on that subcommittee, and I will tell you her involvement was invaluable in that effort. A really fabulous job. And I also want to thank Ms. Zabo, who's been working on the press release and coordinating that for that effort, and that should be available very soon. So thanks to the council and thanks to you both.
Oh, I've got a hot mic here. I forgot about it. And congratulations for the ceremony that you're about to undertake this weekend with your daughter. So we missed you this week, Eric, but I'm sure we'll see you again very soon. Thanks so much. Any other new business, continuing or new business? Seeing none, that concludes our agenda for this week. We will see all of you, if not before, at the next meeting of the council in Annapolis, Maryland in early August. And as always, please get home safely today. And we'll see you all soon. This meeting is now adjourned.